Welcome. We are embarking on an exhaustive, objective, and strictly chronological examination of the life and crimes of Juana Barraza Samperio.
She's documented in the media and public record under the moniker La Mataviejitas.
Right, which translates to the little old lady killer. The mission for our session today is to give you a complete, unvarnished analysis of the documented facts.
The sources cover her entire biography, ranging from her birth in rural Mexico to her current incarceration status.
Exactly. We are taking the available biographical data, the forensic records, and the criminal justice reports, and we are going to look at them from every logical angle.
The scale of this case involves 16 formal murder convictions.
Right, 16.
However, both authorities and the press have estimated the total number of victims to be between 42 and 48 individuals. These crimes occurred between 1998 and 2006.
When you hear those numbers, 16 convictions, but an estimated 42 to 48 actual victims, you immediately start to understand the sheer gravity of the administrative reality here.
The investigation was officially closed following her arrest.
Which means there are more than 30 unresolved cases sitting there, cases that fell outside the 16 formal convictions. We are going to remain strictly focused on the documented realities today.
Those realities include profound missteps in the police investigation and highly unusual clues at the crime scenes.
Yes, and the genuinely surprising dual life the perpetrator maintained. But I want to spend a moment on the institutional context of those numbers.
The closure of the 40-plus cases without individual convictions.
Exactly. I want you to
It indicates a prioritization of securing one definitive life sentence over exhaustive individual resolution.
And having 42 to 48 estimated murders occurring within a single metropolitan area, specifically targeting one highly vulnerable demographic, it created a level of civic paralysis in Mexico City.
The institutional apparatus repeatedly failed to identify the threat for nearly a decade.
A completely systemic failure. To understand how that failure compounded, we have to start at the beginning. Where do the records place her origins?
Juana Barraza Samperio was born on December 27, 1957.
Okay.
The location of birth was Apazoyucan, located in the state of Hidalgo. This is a rural area situated to the north of Mexico City.
Knowing where she started is critical to understanding the environment she eventually exploited. The geographical shift from rural Hidalgo to the sprawling urban environment of Mexico City is a massive factor here.
Apazoyucan in the mid-20th century was an agrarian setting.
Right, characterized by small populations, open spaces, and tight-knit community structures. In a place like that, anonymity is, well, it's virtually impossible. Everyone knows everyone.
Behaviors are observed and regulated by the community.
But eventually, her family dynamics pushed her away from that visibility and toward Mexico City. She entered one of the most densely populated urban centers on the planet.
This transition provided camouflage.
The exact type of camouflage necessary for someone to operate entirely undetected. Mexico City has vast neighborhoods. You can easily disappear into the crowd.
That urban anonymity influenced her ability to sustain a long-term criminal enterprise.
It absolutely did. But to understand the psychology of the offender, we have to look closely at the traumatic roots of her childhood. What do the official records detail about her early family life?
The documented history is defined by severe maternal neglect. Her mother, Justa Samperio, suffered from severe alcoholism.
And the records detail a highly specific, disturbing transaction, right?
Yes, official records state that her mother exchanged Juana for 3 beers.
Exchanging a child for 3 alcoholic beverages.
She was handed over to a man who subjected her to severe and ongoing physical and emotional abuse. This ultimately resulted in a pregnancy and a son.
That specific transaction forms the absolute core of the psychological framework that authorities later constructed for her.
The complete devaluation of human life at a formative stage.
Yes, the total disintegration of the maternal bond. Being handed over to a man who subjected her to severe and ongoing physical and emotional abuse, leading to a pregnancy while she was still incredibly vulnerable, it creates a foundation of inescapable trauma.
Authorities connected this maternal trauma directly to her crimes.
They drew a straight line from this maternal betrayal to her choice of victims. The leading psychological theory developed by criminal psychologists was that Barraza was projecting her own mother onto these elderly female victims.
The theory suggests she believed she was helping society by eliminating them.
Which is an incredibly complex mental projection. It suggests a scenario where all the unresolved rage toward Justice Imperio was systematically displaced onto innocent women who merely shared demographic similarities.
Specifically their age and physical vulnerability.
And introducing the concept that she was, quote-unquote, helping society, it masks deeply personal, violent vengeance as some sort of public service. You have to keep this framework in mind as we analyze the highly systematic nature of the murders.
It was not indiscriminate violence.
No, highly targeted, driven by deeply ingrained psychological association formed through extreme childhood trauma. And her family life continued to be defined by tragedy later on.
She eventually had 4 children in total.
Yeah.
However, she suffered further tragedy when her eldest son died.
From injuries sustained in a mugging, correct?
Yes, the injuries were sustained during a mugging in the city.
That detail adds another massive layer of trauma, compounding a psychological state that was already deeply fractured. Losing a child to random street violence in Mexico City likely reinforced a worldview completely dominated by violence.
It normalized violent death in her immediate orbit.
Now, we need to transition from her origins into how she navigated her adult life, because this brings us to a heavily documented and frankly surreal aspect of this case. She led a very public professional life.
Barraza maintained an active participation in lucha libre,
Which is the Mexican form of masked professional wrestling. To grasp the surreal nature of this, you have to understand the cultural significance of lucha libre.
It involves high theatricality and melodramatic narratives.
Exactly, narratives of good versus evil. The athletes wear elaborate masks to hide their identities. Underneath the theater, it requires immense physical conditioning.
What was her specific role and ring name?
Well, what do the records show for her persona?
She competed under the ring name La Dama del Silencio.
The Lady of Silence.
Within the narrative structure, she performed as a ruda, which is a heel or villain.
When you put those two lives side by side, the juxtaposition is staggering. During the day or on the weekends, she is stepping into a highly publicized arena. She is engaging in theatrical combat portraying a villain.
While concurrently living a secret life committing real-world violence.
Against highly vulnerable individuals. And the name, the Lady of Silence, placed alongside the reality of crimes that permanently silenced dozens of women, it's a chilling detail. But we absolutely must address the physical reality of her profession.
The physical strength and conditioning required for professional wrestling.
Right. Daily training to lift, throw, and grapple builds exceptional upper body strength. It builds cardiovascular stamina. It gives the athlete a practical understanding of human biomechanics.
This physical capability translated directly to her methods of murder.
The authorities noted that the sheer physical strength required to consistently overpower adult victims was significant. Her background provided the exact conditioning necessary to execute these crimes efficiently.
This informs the victimology and modus operandi. The victim profile was entirely uniform.
All women.
All women, aged 60 or older. Many lived entirely alone in Mexico City.
And the forensic cause of death.
Systematically bludgeoned or strangled, followed by robbery.
That victimology points to a very calculated risk assessment strategy, targeting women aged 60 or older who live alone. These are individuals who are physically vulnerable.
They reside in environments where the absence of immediate intervention is highly probable.
Yes, the isolation of the elderly in a dense metropolis. They are surrounded by millions of people, but completely alone behind their doors. The methodical nature of the attacks, bludgeoning or strangling, reinforces her utilization of that wrestling strength.
These methods require sustained physical force and psychological detachment.
And the fact that the murders were followed by robbery introduces a practical material benefit derived from the crimes. It complicates the purely psychological profile of maternal projection.
It introduces elements of opportunistic financial gain.
But the most devastating aspect of her modus operandi was the method of access. She didn't break in, she gained the active trust of her victims.
The method relied on a specific ruse. Barraza posed as a government official or a social worker,
offering these isolated women the chance to sign up for government welfare programs. To execute this, Barraza had to present an aura of authority.
She weaponized the social safety net.
Exactly. Exploiting a social safety net highlights massive systemic vulnerabilities. Put yourself in the position of an elderly citizen living on a fixed income. You keep your doors locked. But a seemingly professional individual arrives holding paperwork,
offering legitimate state-sponsored assistance.
The natural defensive barriers are drastically lowered. This manipulation exploits the fundamental trust citizens place in bureaucratic institutions. They open their doors to a perceived lifeline.
This specific ruse allowed a physically strong former wrestler to easily bypass locked doors.
And once she was inside, the dynamic shifted instantly from a polite bureaucratic conversation to a lethal physical confrontation. This methodology directly contributed to the baffled state of the investigation.
The initial institutional response was heavily criticized. As late as the summer of 2005, media criticized authorities for dismissing evidence of a serial killer.
Officials characterized it as mere media sensationalism.
Yes.
That period of institutional denial is a critical phase. Refusing to acknowledge a coordinated serial killer allowed the body count to rise completely unchecked.
It demonstrates a failure in initial linkage analysis.
When you have dozens of cases with the same victimology, lack of forced entry, and method of execution, those similarities should trigger specialized protocols. Instead, bureaucratic inertia gave her an extended period of operational freedom.
Bernardo Batiz, the chief prosecutor in Mexico City, initially profiled the unknown killer as having a brilliant mind.
A brilliant mind.
He stated the perpetrator was quite clever and careful.
Profiling the killer as having a brilliant mind based solely on evading capture is a massive trap. It distracts investigators from the pragmatic realities of the crimes.
It suggests law enforcement was looking for a highly sophisticated suspect.
Right, elevating the perpetrator to a criminal mastermind. It detached the investigators from the reality that the perpetrator was a working-class individual utilizing a simple interpersonal manipulation tactic.
The most significant profiling failure involved a strict gender assumption.
Which was catastrophic.
Authorities strictly assumed the killer was male.
Even though witnesses were providing contradictory descriptions.
Witnesses consistently described a masculine-looking woman, often specifying a large woman in a red blouse seen leaving a scene.
But the police took those accurate eyewitness accounts and filtered them through their own ingrained societal biases. They had an unyielding adherence to the presumption that a killer operating with such physical brutality simply must be male.
Therefore, police hypothesized it was a transgender person or a man in drag.
They convinced themselves they were looking for a man disguising himself as a woman. What was the operational result of that specific theory?
It led to an unproductive and highly criticized police swoop on Mexico City's transvestite prostitutes.
Massive amounts of police resources were completely diverted to interrogate a marginalized community based on a flawed premise. It alienated the public and yielded zero actionable intelligence.
The actual perpetrator perfectly matched the physical descriptions provided by witnesses.
And she continued to operate in plain sight. When that theory failed, the investigation took an even more passive turn.
2 months later, police began checking the fingerprints of bodies in city morgues.
Based on what theory?
The unfounded theory that the killer might have committed suicide.
That indicates that all active leads had entirely dried up. It is a completely passive strategy. Instead of actively pursuing forensic links, they were just waiting for the perpetrator to appear on a slab.
During this period, false suspects were also presented.
Yes, to relieve public pressure.
Araceli Vasquez and Mario Tablos were arrested in 2005 and occasionally presented by police and media as the killer.
Presenting false suspects to the media temporarily relieves anxiety, but catastrophically damages the long-term integrity of the investigation. If people don't trust the police, they stop calling in tips.
Another bizarre coincidence severely distracted the investigation.
The painting.
At least 3 of the murdered victims owned a print of an 18th century painting by French artist Jean-Baptiste Greuze.
Titled Boy in a Red Waistcoat.
Correct.
Finding the exact same French art print in the homes of at least 3 murdered elderly victims created a massive focal point. In criminal pattern analysis, a detail that's specific is hard to ignore.
Investigators expended resources trying to decode its significance,
Asking if it was a calling card or related to the social worker's ruse, but in reality it was purely an anomaly, a statistical quirk of interior decoration among elderly women in that geographical area.
These false leads created investigative paralysis.
The false arrests, the misidentification of gender, the painting, it created a perfect storm. The task force was chasing men in drag and analyzing French Baroque art, while Barraza moved entirely unhindered.
This continued until the final murder. The date was January 25, 2006.
The breakthrough.
The final victim was Ana Maria de los Reyes Alfaro. She was 82 years old, living in the Venustiano Carranza borough.
She perfectly matched the established profile.
She was strangled with a stethoscope. Barraza was caught in the act and arrested as she was fleeing Alfaro's home.
The events of January 25 represent the moment her established methodology collided with a failure in situational awareness. And the weapon used, a stethoscope, brings the ruse into sharp focus.
It aligns perfectly with her disguise as a government health or social worker.
It is an instrument of medical assessment subverted for strangulation. It demonstrates her pragmatic use of whatever materials were at hand, but the exact timeline of her departure from the scene resulted in her capture.
The physical evidence she possessed upon arrest perfectly matched the composite images the police had previously ignored.
Exactly what did they find on her person?
She had close-cropped hair, dyed blonde, and a facial mole. She was carrying the stethoscope, pension forms, and a card identifying her as a social worker.
An undeniable validation of the eyewitness accounts. The hair, the mole witnesses had been telling the police exactly what she looked like.
The operational materials confirmed the psychological manipulation tactic.
The pension forms and the fake ID were the actual tools she used to bypass those locked doors. And the stethoscope directly linked her to the immediate crime scene.
Following the arrest, prosecutors immediately linked her fingerprints to at least 10 of the roughly 40 attributed murders.
The transition from behavioral theories to undeniable forensic science. What was her documented reaction to this evidence?
She confessed to murdering Alfaro and 3 other women, but vehemently denied the rest.
Confessing to 4 while denying the rest, despite forensic links, shows an attempt to maintain control over her own narrative.
She attempted to justify the murder of Alfaro by claiming it was a dispute over pay for maid services,
Which completely contradicts the forensic reality of her social worker disguise. She was carrying pension forms and a government ID, not cleaning supplies.
The narrative was a fabrication.
A desperate improvisation to explain away the body while ignoring the mountain of forensic evidence stretching back years.
The trial occurred in the spring of 2008.
And the prosecution made a specific decision regarding the total number of victims during the trial.
Yes, the prosecution presented allegations of up to 40 deaths.
A necessary step in publicly acknowledging the true scale of the terror. What was her stated defense motive during the trial?
Barraza maintained her motive was lingering resentment regarding her mother's treatment of her,
Anchoring her explanation in the psychological profile the experts had developed. But the court had to weigh that childhood abuse against the premeditated nature of her crimes against third parties over nearly a decade.
On March 31, 2008, she was found guilty on 16 charges of murder and aggravated burglary. This included 11 separate counts of murder.
And the sentence?
She was sentenced to 759 years in prison.
A sentence of 759 years is a symbolic mathematical accumulation designed to reflect the sheer severity of the crimes. But you have to analyze how Mexican penal law dictates these sentences.
Sentences are served concurrently.
Right, simultaneously rather than consecutively. Furthermore, there is a statutorily defined maximum limit on the amount of time any individual can be incarcerated.
Mexican law mandates a maximum limit of 60 years.
Therefore, while the 759-year sentence serves as a historical declaration of guilt, the practical reality dictates her maximum time served will be 60 years. Given her age at the time of conviction, it ensures she will spend the remainder of her life incarcerated.
Her present life is documented within the Santa Marta Acatitla prison.
How does she occupy her time there?
She works as a gym instructor inside the prison. She also supports her family by selling tacos behind bars.
The fact that she operates as a gym instructor is a direct continuation of her focus on physical conditioning from her time in lucha libre.
Utilizing her physical background within the prison hierarchy.
And the economic reality of selling tacos demonstrates an adaptation to the internal microeconomy of the prison system.
Regarding her personal life, she married a man named Miguel Angel Quiroz in 2015 while serving her sentence.
Which was well into her sentence.
Yes. She subsequently divorced him in 2017.
It illustrates that complex interpersonal dynamics and legal unions continue to occur even within the strict confines of a maximum security environment. It is a structured existence superimposed over a history of extraordinary violence.
The facts of the biography and the investigation are fully established in the record.
Before we conclude our examination of those facts, I want to leave you with a final, objective thought to ponder regarding the source material. Consider how the intersection of deeply ingrained social biases created the exact blind spots necessary for someone like Barraza to operate undetected for nearly a decade. The unyielding assumptions about gender and violence held by law enforcement prevented them from seeing a female perpetrator.
Even when witnesses provided accurate physical descriptions.
Exactly. Furthermore, the societal invisibility of the elderly isolated in massive urban centers provided a highly vulnerable demographic that lacked adequate protection. And finally, the blind trust placed in bureaucratic institutions allowed a predator to turn a promise of social welfare into a fatal manipulation. These systemic vulnerabilities are critical to objectively understanding the full scope of this historical record. Thanks for listening.